Continue with the front piece. The front piece also consists of the hem, the body, the underarm, the shoulder and collar. The hem is identical to the back piece. The overall pattern for the remaining parts is largely the same as the back piece, but the stitch count and the row counts are different. For the section of stocking stitch, we'll create the corresponding pattern by intarsia knitting or jacquard. Please finish the hem and the rows before the pattern. You can see the first 5 rows in the chart, and the pattern is started from row 6. The chart for front piece has colored squares matching to the yarn colors. I'll show you how to create the pattern. Please watch the video first, then proceed to work according to the pattern chart. Intarsia knitting is a technique of carrying yarn vertically as you work, and jacquard involves carrying yarn horizontally. You'll need to prepare some bobbins in advance when doing intarsia or jacquard. Take the first few rows of pattern for example. Here we have 2 lines of color 1. And there's quite a few stitches between them. So we need to prepare 2 bobbins of color 1. And carry the yarn vertically. For the main color, in the first few rows, we have 2 stitches of color 1 here and there, allowing us to carry the yarn horizontally. Therefore, just 1 bobbin of the main color is needed. Since we don't want to cut the yarn continually, we can make the main color left simply into bobbin. I'll show you how to make a bobbin. There are 2 kinds of situations. We either take a new yarn from a separate skein, or take the yarn connecting to the fabric. For both situations, the technique for bobbin making remains the same. First, leave a tail about 10 centimeters, or slightly longer. This tail will be the one you pull out later. Place it like this, between your left thumb and index finger. Close your thumb to hold it. Then, start winding around your fingers in an H shape, like this. If you're taking the yarn connecting to the fabric, do it like this. You see this yarn is connected to the fabric. This makes it convenient for pulling. Wrap with a moderate tension. The more stitches for a color block, the more yarn you should wind onto the bobbin. With fewer stitches for a color block, wind less. If you run out of yarn later on, simply join the yarn to continue. Once you've wound enough yarn, leave a tail and cut off. Then tie a knot like this. Wrap a few rounds to secure the middle first. If the yarn is slippery, you can tie a few more knots. If the tail here is too long, you can trim it slightly shorter. This is how you make a bobbin. Gently pull like this for working. A bobbin keeps the yarn in place while working. You see, it won't slip down. When there are multiple bobbin, they're less likely to get tangled with each other. It makes it easier to work. If your bobbin runs out and it becomes a bit loose, you can undo and rewind it. If you made a mistake in the process, and you need to undo, you can make the unraveled yarn into a bobbin. Place the end connected to the fabric in place. After winding, secure the middle. There you have it. Next, you can make all the bobbins you need before you go back to work. Row 6 is worked on the wrong side. Read the chart from left to right. First, use the main color we reserved, and work normally until you reach the stitch before color 1. I have fewer stitches here, and have no garter stitch on both sides. I'll just lay out the technique. After that, I'll show you how to join the yarn, either on right side or wrong side. The yarn joining stays the same. Here, I'm joining the yarn on the wrong side. Take up the new yarn and tie a knot with the old yarn. Pull it to the fabric. That's how you join the yarn. If you're joining on the right side, do it after you finish the stitch before the new block. Then tie the new yarn with the old one and pull it to the fabric. After joining, the chart requires 2 stitches of color 1, and the middle part is worked with the main color, followed by another 2 stitches of color 1, and finish the row with the main color. I'll work 2 stitches with this yarn first. The tails can be woven in later. Here, we have stitches fewer than 3. Carry the main color across horizontally, and continue working. Note: every time we finish the first stitch after the color changing, gently stretch the fabric to ensure the carried yarn lies smoothly. or the fabric will shrink, losing its elasticity. If you need to carry the yarn horizontally for more than 3 stitches, trap the carried yarn about every 3 stitches. That means the carried yarn should be trapped when the stitch is worked. You can see, I trapped the yarn twice here. If the stitches of color 1 are done, and you need the main color for the next stitch, just pull this yarn over and work with it. This is how you carry the yarn horizontally on the wrong side. Let's go back to the position with 2 stitches left. Continue purling with the main color. The sample has fewer stitches. Please focus on the techniques. I'll leave out this cliché from here on. This color 1 stays here. We'll carry the yarn vertically later. After the middle stitches, add another bobbin of color 1. And purl 2 stitches with it. When done, carry the main color across to finish this row. Now, this yarn stays here. This row is now complete. Now, we knit the next row on the right side. Start by knitting with the main color, then knit 2 stitches of color 1, knit again with the main color. Knit 2 stitches of color 1, and finish the row with the main color with main color. I've already finished the beginning. This yarn is now paused. and we'll be knitting with this yarn. Note: here you need to trap the paused yarn. In this case, we place the paused yarn on top. The working yarn goes underneath. Then we knit the corresponding number of stitches. After one stitch, let's check the wrong side. The paused yarn is trapped. That create a tight texture at the color block junctions. And keep the fabric neat. Knit another stitch. Then, pull this yarn over and knit with it. Note: when carrying the yarn horizontally, every time we finish the first stitch after the color changing, gently stretch the fabric. To ensure the carried yarn lies smoothly. If you have more than 3 stitches here, you need to trap the yarn as you go, just like we did on the wrong side. Trap the yarn about every 3 stitches. If you're changing to the main color, just knit with it. This is how you carry the yarn horizontally on the right side. Let's go back. And knit the middle stitches with this yarn. Now change to this yarn and knit 2 stitches. Carry the main color across to finish this row. Now this row is done. Continue to work the next row on the wrong side. The color scheme is identical to the previous 2 rows. When working on the wrong side, always trap the yarn before you work as intarsia. Again, when we finish the first stitch after the color changing, the paused yarn should already be trapped. Finish this row. And the next one. After the first 4 rows of the pattern, continue to work the next row on the wrong side. Let's take a look at the chart. Since there are quite a few stitches between these 2 main color block, we may prepare another bobbin of main color. The old bobbin will be used for this color block, and the new one can be used for these 2 blocks. That means after the corresponding number of stitches at the beginning of the row, the main color stays. We'll work these stitches with color 1. And these stitches with the new bobbin of main color. Switch to color 1 for 2 stitches. Switch back to main color. And finish the rest. Now, let's work this row together. Now this row is complete. Here, there's an additional bobbin of main color. After finishing this row on the wrong side, continue knitting the next row on the right side. The color scheme differs from the previous row by just this stitch. Work with main color here. And color 1. Until the stitch before the next block of color 1. With another bobbin of color 1. Work the block out. You see, the starting point of this main color for the next row is right here. Which is far from where it ends in this row. Therefore, when you're working these stitches with color 1, you need to carry the main color across horizontally to this starting point. So the main color stays there. If the starting point for next row is no more than 3 stitches away from the ending point, you don't need to carry the yarn. Let's do it together. First, switch to color 1 and knit. Since we have more than 3 stitches for carrying across, we trap the yarn every 3 stitches. Don't forget to do that before you switch colors here. When you carry the yarn across to the starting point for the next row, the yarn stays there. And we'll finish the required stitches. And the row. Now, move on to next row. Note: when you reach this point, you'll encounter color 1. Carry color 1 across to the next starting point as you go. Then work 2 stitches with it. Switch to another bobbin of main color, and continue working. Let's do this together. Note: you need to trap the paused yarn here. You can see that the technique for carrying the yarn across on the wrong side is the same as on the right side, that is, trap the paused yarn properly. After these stitches of main color, work with color 1 you just carried across. This yarn stays here. After these 2 stitches with color 1, continue working with the other main color and color 1. Finish this row. Let me lay out the key points for the pattern working. For intarsia, always trap the yarn before you start working. The paused yarn should go underneath. And when a color is finished in a row, looking in advance for the next starting point for this color, you may need to carry the yarn across to somewhere nearby and let it stay there, or add a new bobbin of it. Take here for example. After the beginning section with the main color, we added a bobbin of it. For the remaining stitches, and for this short section, color 1 ends here. and starts here for the next time. So, when working with the main color here, carry color 1 to the corresponding position as you go, making it convenient for these 2 stitches. Or it could be too loose. For jacquard, when there is no more than 3 stitches before the next color changing, just switch colors and work normally. If there is more than 3 stitches, carry the yarn across about every 3 stitches. In the same way as here, every time we finish the first stitch after the color changing, gently stretch the fabric. Make sure the carried yarn lies smoothly, or the fabric will shrink. You can see that we do in tarja and jacquard, according to the pattern chart. And you can also make your own choice. Another thing, when weaving in the tails, those from the pattern should be woven in on the wrong side, at the junctions between 2 color blocks. You can weave in the entire tail. Just keep a pretty appearance of the right side. Next, please follow the chart and keep working. For the neckline, we bind off with the color for the last stitch of previous row. Each time you bind off the last stitch, work the stitch with the color of the stitch next to the bind off symbol. Then bind off the last stitch. You should slip 1 stitch. Switch to color 1 and work 1 stitch. Then bind off the previous stitch. For these stitches to bind off in the middle of the neckline, knit and bind off them with the main color. After the last row of the shoulder, join the loops with those from back piece and bind off. For example, this side is the actual left side of shoulder. It should be joined with the left side of back piece. This side is the actual right side of shoulder. It should be joined with the actual right side of back piece. Let's see how to join the pieces. The first way is to do stitch to stitch. We do this usually when both pieces are with loops. We do 3 needles bind off to join the pieces together. It's typically used for the shoulders. There are 2 pieces with loops. Consider the side of stocking stitch as the right side, and we usually work the 3 needles bind off on the wrong side. So, hold the pieces with their right sides facing each other. Typically, one of them still has the yarn on. Whichever the one does, put the yarn on your right. For 3 needles bind off, you'll knit and bind off stitches in the same time. That means to insert loops on both pieces, knit them and bind off. The stitch count on both pieces is usually identical. Just match them up and bind off. If one piece has more stitches, you'll need to decrease on that one while binding off. Suppose this piece has more stitches. Insert 2 loops on it. And another loop on the other piece. Knit as one stitch and bind off. If the back piece has more stitches, insert 1 loop on the front piece and 2 loops on the back one. Knit as one stitch and bind off. In my case, both pieces have the same stitch count. Keep binding them off. Tie a knot and hide the tail. This is how it looks after the bind off. That concludes the front piece. After the front and back pieces, sew up the side seams. The sewing length can be found in the chart. Or you can do it as you like. Here, we're sewing row to row. Here's a video about how to do it. For the sewing for row to row, we usually do it seamlessly. When sewing, pick up the horizontal strands of stitches along the edges. First, let's get familiar with the piece. Locate the first stitch on the edge. There are typically 4 types of it. The first one is a slipped stitch. It is slipped without working, following the texture, and creates a big braid. The second one is also slipped, but slipped against the texture. So, it creates a knot like this. The third type is worked in every row. Typically, it is knitted on the right side and purled on the wrong side. It creates a small braid like this. The fourth type is also knitted in every row, and usually knitted on both right and wrong sides. It creates a ribbed texture, like a washboard. The second stitch is on the left of the first one. Take this piece for example. Looking at this side, the second stitch shows a knit texture. From the other side, the second stitch shows a purl texture. Whether knit or purl texture, you'll notice that the loop is facing upwards. And for the reversed loop, the horizontal below is the horizontal strand between two stitches. The same applies to this side. This is a reversed loop. And this is the horizontal strand between two stitches. For the fourth type of edge stitch, this is the second stitch. This is an entire column of the second stitches, with loops facing upward. Between these two stitches, you have a line like this below a reversed loop. This is the horizontal strand between two stitches. For the second type of edge stitch, there's also horizontal strands between these two stitches. For all types of edge stitch, one strand generally corresponds to one row. Before sewing, secure the tails on the wrong side with a few stitches, and tie a knot. I won't do that here. For seamless sewing, alternate between the two pieces. Pick up the horizontal strands along the edges and sew. Pick up one or two horizontal strands each time. Note, if the row counts on both pieces match, you can sew them together correspondingly. You should pick the same number of horizontal strands each time. Always insert the needle where you last pulled out. To pick up the horizontal strand. Here, I'll pick up one horizontal strand each time. After a few stitches, gently tighten the yarn. If the row counts don't match, but you want an even connection, you may pick up a bit more strands on the side with more rows. For example, generally, you'd pick up one strand every time. On the side with more rows, at proper points, pick up two strands. Since these two pieces have the same row counts, I'll continue sewing them together. This is how you do a seamless sewing on rows. Now the body side is sewn up. We'll pick up stitches around the neckline to work the collar in rounds. The number of stitches to pick up is marked in the chart. The picking up technique for round 1 can be found in the following video. Let's pick up the stitches for round 1. I'll be working on this sample. We'll start in the back piece. You can see that the back piece is usually divided into 3 sections, the flanks and the middle part. Before picking up, you can distribute the total number of picking up for the back piece onto the 3 sections, according to the chart. Usually, we pick up stitches evenly for the middle part. The remaining stitches should be evenly distributed onto the flanks. For example, if I need to pick up a total of 21 stitches for the back piece, I pick up 11 stitches evenly in the middle part. These 11 stitches are typically the stitches we bound off for the middle part, and we'll pick 5 stitches on each side. For this round, we knit all stitch. For an edge like this, pick up a few strands along the edge and distribute the stitches roughly evenly. Here, I'm working with different colors, which makes it easier to watch. After the sides, pick up 11 stitches evenly for the middle part. Once done, pick up 5 more stitches roughly evenly on this side. Once done, you reach the front piece. Distribute the total number of picking up for the front piece onto the 3 sections. For example, I need to pick up a total of 39 stitches for the front piece. I bound off 7 stitches here in the middle part, so I'll pick up 16 stitches on each side. Just distribute them roughly evenly. After that, check the number of stitches, then distribute them evenly onto 3 straight needles. That concludes round 1. Now, the chart requires decreases for round 2, so we'll decrease 4 stitches evenly on the back piece, and 1 stitch on each side of the front piece. You can use stitch markers to roughly mark the decrease positions. The specific number of decreases can also be adjusted according to need. Markers first, and begin working. For round 2, we mostly purl the stitches, and decrease by K2 tog. Here's a video about it. Knit 2 stitches together, also known as K2 tog. To do so, insert the right needle from right to left through both loops on the left needle. Purl as 1 stitch. The P2 tog is complete. You can see that the left loop is on top. Let's do it again. Insert the right needle through both loops on the left needle. Purl as 1 stitch. This is how you do a P2 tog. Now we'll work evenly, from row 3 and on. We'll knit 1 round and purl the next round. To create the garter stitch, please follow the chart. To finish the collar, after that, you need to bind off. I'll show you the Icelandic bind off by working on this sample. This technique is usually applied on garter stitch. First, knit 1 stitch. Then, slide this loop onto the left needle, moving from left to right. Next, insert the first loop from right to left, and the second loop from left to right. Knit 1 stitch. Release these 2 loops. This binds off 1 stitch. Again, slide the loop onto the left needle. Pick up the second loop though the first one. Knit the stitch. This binds off another stitch. Repeat this process to bind off more stitches. When there's only one stitch left, leave a tail about 15 centimeters before cutting the yarn. Slightly tighten. Weave the tail in along the texture on the wrong side. Then, sew a few stitches to connect both ends. Make it neat and smooth. Finally, weave in the tail and cut. You can also weave in the entire tail. That's how you do the Icelandic bind off. Up to this point, we've covered the whole vest. If you have any question during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website, Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.